The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So I'm excited about tonight. For me, this week has been the introduction into the draft season for me. Now, there's free agency, and we're going to talk about that a ton, and you can't skip steps. But I already told you guys, because I always shoo the draft off until I can't shoo it off anymore, because I told you once I start, I don't stop until the draft gets here. And that process has started for me now, and there's no turning back. So there'll be little detours here and there, you know, free agency and things of that nature, but it's draft and it's all gas, no brakes. So I'm done with the quarterback position. Pretty much feel comfortable with the work that I've turned in for that position. And I'm ready to move on to the next position. And I really think I'm going to ask you guys what position you think I should tackle next that I can start watching and dive into. So that'll be something that we get into over the next day or two. There'll be content coming out over the weekend to keep you connected and get you to next week, and then we'll start the process all over again. But in the meantime, tonight is a big night because there's no bigger pick for us than the number 2 overall pick. And it's a massive decision. Shout out to the mob. Stand up. We in the building. You know what it is. Shout out to all the mob members that kicked it with the kid last night and watched the film and kind of got a taste of my workflow, how I go through watching film, what I'm looking at, and how I come to the conclusions that I ultimately come to. So, again, small sample size. We only watched 2 games of each of the 3 quarterbacks, so it was a small sample size, but you kind of get the picture. You get the gist of what's going on here. So with that said, I haven't divulged what I personally would do and who I would select at number 2 overall. As the process continues to wear on, I think I've made it abundantly clear that I expect the Bears to take Caleb Williams number 1 overall. It'd be something catastrophic that has to happen. Essentially him telling the Bears that he doesn't want to play for them, which I don't see him doing. It would have to take something along those lines for the Bears to come off of Caleb Williams. And I just don't see that happening. And so I think they're going to trade Justin Fields. And I think they're going to take Caleb Williams number 1 overall, which is what I would do if I were them. And so really for Washington, it's a 2-man race. It's not a secret who they'll more likely than not be choosing from. Drake May and Jaden Daniels. And it's amazing. And I knew it would happen last night. Roughly, there were about 70 of us in the film session last night. And it turned into a back and forth as to why this guy is better than this guy and why they should take this guy. And, you know, that's not my steez, right? That's not my thing to get into a debate with someone about why you should or shouldn't. It's a preference thing, right? Some people prefer experience over raw ability. Some people prefer upside over a high floor. right? Give me the high ceiling guy over the high floor. That's some people's perspective and preference. Some people like mobile quarterbacks who are dynamic. Others don't necessarily care for that. What do you do in the pocket? That's what matters most. So you really, it's impossible to get people to really agree on who's the right selection or not. But my thing has always been and will always be, we don't have to agree, but when you give me your reasons as to why, just make it make sense. Like some of the arguments last night, as a lot of times, and this is where I get lost. If you don't have the evidence or you don't have the data to support your stance, then it turns into a mudslinging match, right? Where you start talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the actual topic at hand because you're trying to deflect from the fact that you don't have the answers. And that's fine. Just say, I just like this guy better, period. You might not, the person that you're talking to may not like the answer, but that's fine, right? Instead of just going into a different direction. At the end of the day, I'm going to give you my list of the 7 quarterbacks, but we really need to only be concerned with 3 of them. That's the beauty of being in the position that we're in. The only other position that would be even better than the one we're in currently is being number 1. Then you'd get to the pick of the litter, right? You get to pop the top on the quarterback position and you get to take the one that you deem to be the best. We may not ultimately take the one that we deem to be the best because we're not in a position to dictate that. Similar to where we were back in 2020, where I really strongly believe that if we had our choice, we would have taken Joe Burrow, but we didn't. We were number 2. And because Cincinnati was like, we're not trading a pick, we're taking Joe Burrow, we took Chase Young. Made sense to me then. Obviously, in hindsight, you probably should have taken the quarterback. We should have taken Justin Herbert. We take Justin Herbert. Is Justin Herbert still Justin Herbert? Probably not. Who knows? We'll see. We'll never know, I should say. But that's nor here nor there. We're in that same spot. This time, there are other options that are available that we like. Remember, if you go back to that 2020 draft, most people, not everybody, and a lot of you swear up and down that you wanted Herbert or you wanted Tua, and that's fine. We weren't hearing a lot of that back in 2020. Most people were saying, take Chase Young. I was one of them. So it is what it is. This time around, it's a consensus across the board that quarterback is the pick. Not by all fans now. Right, not by all fans. There's a lot of fans that still believe in Sam Howell. You have to fix the offensive line before you bring anybody into this organization, and so you need to do that. My response to those fans are always, it's always the same. You don't have to draft an offensive lineman at 2 to fix the offensive line. There are alternate ways to fix this offensive line. So, with that said, I've done my homework. I feel confident about my list. I'm confident about my reasons as to why. You may not agree, but such is life. I also want to say that I've seen a lot of coaching interviews circulating, people having an opportunity to speak with a lot of the positional coaches and the coordinators and whatnot. I haven't sunk my teeth into that yet. My plan is to do it tomorrow. I'm going to release a video kind of talking about what was said and anything that we may have been able to glean from these conversations. I saw a little, tidbit of a Larry Izzo interview. I saw Tavita Pritchard. We've seen the 2 coordinators, Joe Witt Jr. and Cliff Kingsbury making their rounds as well. So I'm going to gather as much intel as I can, and I'll probably spit out a video on what I gathered over the weekend, if I deem it to be important enough, right? So we'll get into all of that, but for now, let's go ahead and dive into what you came here for, and that's the list of my 7 quarterbacks, top 7 quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL draft, and who I think is the best option for Washington to take, and why at number 2. So without any further ado, let's get to the business of the situation, shall we? I think we shall. So this is not rocket science. If you've been watching yourself, and a lot of you have been, and probably were watching way before I started watching these prospects, you know a lot more than I do. Then a lot of this is not a surprise to you. A lot of you think you know how I think, but you have no idea. You don't know what's in my brain. Anyway, I enjoy reading what you think I think. Anyway, we'll start off with number 7. You know how I like to do. You know how I do it. When I get listy, I start listing things, and my list are comprised of 7 items. This is no different. We start with number 7, my 7th best quarterback in the 2024 NFL draft, Spencer Rattler. Now, I gave strong consideration to Michael Pratt, a quarterback out of Tulane. He gives me Aiden O'Connell vibes, a guy that played a lot of college football, has some interesting traits, but nothing necessarily stands out about Michael Pratt. Not enough for him to crack this list. I said this in the videos, and you'll see this when you watch the videos that I put out over the weekend. But I said this in the video with 2 prospects in particular, Spencer Rattler and Bo Nix. Bo Nix in particular, but Rattler's, he falls into this category as well. He was one of the toughest evaluations I've ever had to do because of the human element. This group of quarterbacks, I think, signifies the end of I call them the COVID quarterbacks, right? The COVID guys that stuck around in college for like 20 years. I think this is the last crop of those quarterbacks that got that extra eligibility. Feel like we've been watching them for, a decade. I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. I feel like Sam Hartman has been in college when I was in college. That's how long it feels like I've been watching Sam Hartman play football at the collegiate level. And we've seen a bunch of dudes transfer 4 and 5 times, it feels like, and they're still playing college ball, but it's coming to an end. And Rattler is one of those guys. It feels like he's been playing forever. Started at Oklahoma, transferred over. And it's a lot of those guys in this draft. Started their career, whether you're talking Michael Penix Jr., you're talking Jaden Daniels, Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix. I mean, this draft is littered with guys that started somewhere, ended up somewhere else, and got better as time progressed. It's hard, though. It's hard, though, to unsee what Spencer Rattler was at Oklahoma. And it wasn't all bad, but for me, it was more bad than good. And I'm impressed at how he reshaped his career at South Carolina in a tougher conference, by the way. But there's still some deficiencies, some things that you just have to take with Spencer Rattler. I talk about that stuff in his breakdown, but there's a lot to like about Spencer Rattler. And I'll just say this without giving too much away. He's a gamer. And I have the utmost respect for those types of guys. You can rally the troops around a guy like Spencer Rattler. And he's going to fight his balls off to try to win football games for you. Won't always be successful, but he'll give you a fighting chance. I'll say this too. Spencer Rattler will start in this league at some point. Don't know when. I'm not saying it'll be in 2024. Trust me. Don't know where he's going. But if he ends up in the right spot, he'll be starting sooner rather than later. Guys like him always find their way into the starting lineup. And if he ends up on the right team in the right situation, who knows? He could end up being a solid. I don't see star level NFL quarterback written all over Spencer Rattler. But what I do see is low level NFL starter, guy you can get by with, a guy that'll play 12 years in the league. I could see that. We'll see what happens with him. He's intriguing because there's a lot of talent there. He didn't end up at Oklahoma and then South Carolina on accident. It's a lot of talent with Spencer Rattler. All right. Going on to number 6. J.J. McCarthy. National championship winning quarterback of the Michigan Wolverines. I've already put out my Draft Prospects 101 series video on him. What you have to know about me, and I've learned over the years, and my perception has changed as I've done this more and more. In past years, I was more of the, I want to see it. I need tangible proof that this guy can do this, that, and this. Don't tell me he's capable because he has the traits and the tools. If I don't see it consistently enough, I just assume he can't do it. And what that ended up doing to me was it made me wrong a lot of times, because I would go with the guy that showed it to me in college. He'd get to the NFL and it wasn't good enough. Meanwhile, the guy that I pushed aside because he had the traits and he was capable, but he wasn't consistent enough in college, and everybody said, hey, don't pass on the guy with the tools and the traits. I'd get that guy out of here. J.J. McCarthy has shown me who he is. Right? I know who he is. I've seen J.J. McCarthy numerous times. The names may change, but it's all the same. He's already played in the league 50 million times over. You can win football games, as the Michigan Wolverines did with J.J. McCarthy. But is he going to win you a football game? Can you strap a game to his back? I told you that Michigan, when the games were the toughest, when it got tight, they moved away from J.J. McCarthy. They ran the football. They didn't strap the team to his back. They didn't strap the offense to his back. They said, J.J., don't make a mistake. Manage the game. Manage the offense. And if we had a punt, we'll punt. You'll make a throw here. You'll make a throw there. You'll run here. You'll run there. But against Penn State, they ran the ball 32 times in a row. There was one pass in there, ended up being pass interference, so that down didn't count. They ran it 32 times in a row. What elite level NFL quarterback that doesn't get hurt in a game, that starts a game, finishes a game 7 of 8 for 60 yards? In a big time matchup with 2 ranked teams playing. Show me the last guy that did that. J.J. McCarthy's a game manager with traits that will allow you to do some things with him. And this is something that I didn't bring up in his video because this is a personal thing. So I didn't want to inject my personal feelings about JJ McCarthy in that video that's going to be watched by people who don't know me, right? You guys, y'all know me enough to know that it ain't personal. But this is how I feel. JJ McCarthy struggles with mental confidence, right? Self-confidence. He has a mental situation that requires him to do yoga, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But for me, preference-wise, I don't want my quarterback in his own head. And they talked about him getting to a dark place. He wasn't right mentally just 2 years ago. He wasn't right mentally. And then he started doing yoga, and he started doing breathing exercises and different things. And it got him to a place where he's at a zen now, right? Good for him. But what that tells me is if enough bad events happen to him, is he going to go back to that place? What happens when his yoga doesn't center him and it doesn't put him back where he needs to be? Is he going to have a mental breakdown? Is he going to start playing bad football? I don't know. But those are questions I don't want to have to answer as a coach. So I'm more likely to just move on from JJ McCarthy because of those questions that I have. He's number 6 on my list. And you know what? Ultimately, he may end up being the 4th quarterback taken in this draft. He may end up in the 1st round. I think we will see 4 quarterbacks go in the 1st round, a bare minimum of 4. There could be a 5th. My guess is 4 go in the 1st round. McCarthy could be one of them. We'll see. If it were up to me, he wouldn't be. He wouldn't be. So we're clear. I've got a 3rd round grade on Spencer Rattler. I've got a 2nd round grade on JJ McCarthy. As we head to number 5. Michael Penix Jr. I love Michael Penix Jr. because he's boom or bust. There's no in between with him. When you watch him on tape, you won't find a quarterback that throws it deep more than Michael Penix Jr. He does not give a shit. He throws caution to the wind, and he's going to let it rip. And it may be incomplete. His guy may catch it, but it's not going to stop him from doing it again and again and again and again. There's some things that I address with him on about him rather on his video that were a bit shocking to me. Probably the most shocking of all of the things that I uncovered in my work, covering these, watching these prospects and developing a sort of a feeling about them, right? He's interesting. I think there's a misnomer out there about him. Obviously, the injuries are a concern, one that you can't overlook. As much as you would like to, it's real, it exists, and it's there, and those questions will have to be answered. Seems like he's got a clean bill of health. All we've heard is that he's doing, his body's physically fine right now, and great. I hope it stays that way, but you can't ignore the injury history with this dude. But the talent is definitely there. The arm talent is definitely there. The ability is definitely there. All that needs to end up being there for him is the opportunity, frankly. So he comes in at number 5. And something about Spencer Rattler too. His stock is rising. He was the MVP of the Senior Bowl, right? So that's something else to throw in there, that he's making a power move. He can continue that momentum through the combine and remind people of why he was such a highly rated prospect when he ended up at Oklahoma. So this is his opportunity. Take the momentum that you gained from the Senior Bowl, roll that into the combine, look good there, spin it, kill the interviews, and then knock out your pro day, continue to interview well, and see what happens. Now we get to number 4. Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been the most grueling evaluation I've ever had to do. I've been doing this for 12 years now. This meaning breaking down prospects. I started in the 2012 draft with Luck and Griffin and Brandon Whedon and Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson, that group, Kirk Cousins. That was my first year really evaluating prospects in the draft. Never have I had to rewire my brain in such a dramatic fashion to properly evaluate a prospect like I had to do with Bo Nix. I was so over Bo Nix, the Auburn version, that when he went to Oregon, there was nothing he could do to change my perception of him. It was all bad. Nothing good. And several people tried to say and told me flat out, bro, if you still looking at him as the Auburn Bo Nix, you're just flat out wrong. He's a different guy now. And you just got to accept that and move on. And I had to have a come to Jesus moment when I was watching his tape. And I had to say, bro, you got to let that shit go. You got to let it go. And you got to move on. I can't unsee Auburn Bo Nix, the struggles against Florida and Georgia. I can't unsee that. You know, his best victory of his career came in his freshman year against Alabama. Outside of that, he got his ass whooped in the SEC. I can't unsee that. But he got better. He did get better. Now, I've got questions about him getting better. We'll see what those answers ultimately are. But the tape, it is what it is, and it speaks for itself. And there's a lot of good tape with Bo Nix. There's a lot of good qualities that come with Bo Nix. His video is coming out tomorrow, so you'll have a chance to see what I'm talking about when I talk about Bo Nix and my experience with Bo Nix and how it was a bit of a struggle for me. But to me, when you size him up with the talent that's in this draft, Bo Nix, to me, is the 4th best quarterback in this draft class. And Michael Penix Jr., much like Bo Nix, I have a late first, early second round grade. If you took Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. in the first round, I wouldn't even blink. Would not even blink. If they ended up in the second round, that's fine too. So now we're getting to our top 3, right? And the order of these 3 don't necessarily reflect how I feel. Or does it? You won't know unless I tell you. Let's get to number 3. My 3rd quarterback is Jaden Daniels. So I don't know if you guys recall the interview that I did with John Bueller of Fansided. I had him on the program. We talked about Dan Quinn, which was the main purpose for him coming on. But towards the end, he's a college football guy through and through. right? Even though he's an Atlanta fan and he covers, you know, the NFL and he knows the Atlanta teams back and forth. He's a college football guy, probably more so than anything else. And so knowing his background, we kind of bled the conversation into college football and specifically the quarterbacks. We had a nice little conversation at the tail end of that interview. And in that interview, he said all three of these quarterbacks, and I hadn't watched the quarterbacks yet. So I couldn't agree with him. I couldn't disagree with him. I just took in the information that he was giving me. And he dropped some gems, what turned out to be some gems on my melon, right? He was 110% spot on. And you know what was crazy is I'm listening to him, and then I got all the other Washington fans telling me that you're not going to like these guys. They're trash. You were better off with Sam Howell. I know you're going to like Sam Howell better than these guys, yada, 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 you know. And so I'm hearing all of that, and I'm hearing him tell me all three of these dudes are good. And you're going to like all three, and you can't go wrong with all three of them. And then he said something that was very profound. At the time, I couldn't verify this, but I took it in again. And I said to myself, we'll see about that. John Bueller said, of the three quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and Drake May have the higher ceiling, lower floor. Jaden Daniels is the safest pick of any quarterback in this draft. He's got the higher floor, but the ceiling isn't as high. And I said, okay, I appreciate that information. Took it in. Didn't know if I would agree with it or not, but I said, okay. He was spot on with his assessment. Higher ceiling for Caleb Williams and Drake May, lower floors for both of those individuals. We could be talking about all pro quarterbacks, or we could be talking about busts that are out of the league in 5 years. More likely than not, if you're a first round pick quarterback, you're going to get multiple opportunities to prove that you can at least be a backup quarterback if your ego allows you to be, like a Sam Darnold, for instance. You'll keep getting opportunities. We don't just throw away former first round pick quarterbacks. We give you a couple spins around the block before we decide you're trash and you can't do it. Jaden Daniels is the safest quarterback in the 2024 NFL draft, if you ask me. His ability to run the football, his ability to take care of the ball, not put it in harm's way, allows him, and the experience. That's something else you can't discount. Man has over 50 career starts in his collegiate career. Seasoned already. He comes in. You don't have to add anything. No salt, no pepper. You don't even got to put any hot sauce on this. This is seasoned to perfection already. He comes in and he's ready to go right out of the gate. And as my guy Derek B yesterday said, he can turn a bad play into a positive like that with his legs. He's dangerous. But he also leaves a lot to be desired in the form of throwing the football. Not the biggest arm, so that's going to limit some of the things he can do and get away with at the next level. When he scrambles, this is the thing that kind of gives me a bit of pause with him. When he scrambles, when he leaves the pocket, he's not looking for guys down the field. He's looking to run. Now, he can evolve in that way and start to be a little bit more aware of his surroundings and where his targets are, and guys will start to work to try to get open, and he may be able to find them at a more successful rate as time progresses. But right now, that's not who he is. When he tucks it, he's tucking it to run. That said, there's a lot to like about Jaden Daniels. And if Washington took him at number 2, I'd be just as giddy as I would be if we got Caleb Williams or Drake May. Honestly, I'm being 110% honest with you. These three quarterbacks are interchangeable to me. Is Caleb Williams better than the other two? Sure he is. Absolutely. But getting Caleb Williams would force us to give up things that I don't know if I'm comfortable giving up to get him. Because I don't know if the difference between him and Drake May and Jaden Daniels is great enough. If the gap is great enough to where I'm willing to part ways with what it's going to take to get him, it's going to take a little bit of the luster off of how good I might feel about getting Caleb Williams. That said, Jaden Daniels going to be really good in this league, I feel like. This is the first draft in a while, because I didn't feel that way about 2021. I didn't know. I thought Trey Lance could be good. I didn't know. He only played one college football season. Nobody could have known. I didn't think he would flame out in San Francisco the way that he did and have the injuries and things of that nature. I thought he would be a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense. So I thought he was going to be successful, but I didn't know. I was flat out wrong about Zach Wilson. I would even have entertained back then Zach Wilson being the #1 overall pick over Trevor Lawrence. I would have entertained that, but I wasn't turning down Trevor Lawrence. But I would have entertained that thought. I was listening. If your argument was strong enough, you could have swayed me. I would have been wrong had I jumped ship, but I would have stuck with Trevor Lawrence. That was the right pick, right? But I didn't feel good about Justin Fields. I didn't feel good about Mac Jones. I remember saying Mac Jones doesn't have a superpower. We see how that turned out for him so far. Anyway, this is the first draft probably since 2018. I think it's how far back I have to go, where I thought you were getting 3 quarterbacks that were going to come in and automatically be good. Even in 2020's draft class with Burrow, Herbert, and Tua, I didn't think all 3 of them would be good. I wasn't a Herbert fan. You guys know that. If you watched, you knew I wasn't a Herbert guy. He's probably the one that got away from me in terms of my evaluation, and he single-handedly has changed the way that I view quarterbacks coming into the league now. He's reset the way that I organize my thoughts when talking about quarterbacks, because you can't just go off of what you see necessarily. You also have to take into consideration what these guys are capable of, what they can be in 2-3 years from now. Which leads me to number 2. Obviously, Drake May. And I can go ahead and give you number 1. I'm not hiding anything at this point, right? Caleb Williams is number 1. But the upside on Drake May, it is what everybody said it was. And watching him, yeah, there's a lot of mistakes and there's a lot of misses and there's a lot of things that, they irk me, ball placement and little things that I've talked to you and I showed you last night, right? If you were with us in the mob watching the film, I showed you those things. You got to see it if you hadn't already watched it for yourself. But there's also some breathtaking throws. There's enough athleticism there that he can extend plays with his legs. But unlike Jaden Daniels, he's extending plays to throw the football, not just to be a runner. But when he has to be a runner, he's fully capable of doing that. He's a big guy. You know how I'm a sucker for taller quarterbacks. He's every bit of 6'4". When he measures out, I'll be shocked if he's 6'3" and some change. And if he is 6'3" and some change, he's like 6'3" and 7/8. Like, he's a legit 6'4". We saw him standing next to Sam Howell at the UNC game against Duke. He looked like he was 8 feet tall standing next to Sam Howell. Now, that probably speaks more to Sam Howell being short, which we all knew. But Sam Howell isn't 5'11". Okay. Sam Howell is like 6 feet and some change. Drake May looked like he was 7'1" standing next to Sam Howell. So I know he's 6'4", easy. So he can see over the line. He has a lot of different tools at his disposal. A rocket arm, good athleticism and feet. He can run. I heard something today that made me smile just a bit because, again, one of the things you don't know about these prospects is who they are as a person, their love of the game, how much they're willing to invest to be great. You couldn't have known Tom Brady was going to turn into Tom Brady, but you didn't know that Tom Brady was going to have that kind of Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan competitiveness. You didn't know that. You couldn't have known that unless you talked to him. You don't know these things unless you get to know them intimately. You have conversations with them. You talk to people who know them, who've been working with them, who can give you insight that we just don't have as fans. And I heard somebody today, I want to say it was his coordinator at UNC, who said, this guy's a film rat. This dude loves the X's and O's. He wants to be great. Now, we heard the same thing about Sam Howell, right? Phil Longo told us there'll be a 30 for 30 one day about all the teams that passed on him. We were told that. And I still think he can be a really good quarterback in this league, by the way. Don't know if there'll be a 30 for 30 now, though. That probably he would have needed to work here in Washington in order to facilitate a 30 for 30. But he goes somewhere else and plays well. Who knows, right? But Drake May has undeniable talents. And look, it's raw. He's 21 years old. He's a young pup. And coaching is going to be important with him. But there's a lot of things, and I remember doing this with Justin Herbert. There's a lot of things that you couldn't coach, and Justin Herbert had them all. And I pushed him aside because he went to Oregon. You know, that was an easy way to discredit Justin Herbert's talents. Oh, he went to Oregon. I've watched enough of these Oregon guys, Joey Harrington and Marcus Mariota, come out of that program, you know, not be great leaders, struggle at the NFL level. They're throwing the wide open receivers. You can make any excuse you want. If you don't like a guy, you'll come up with a million of them. I did that when it came to Justin Herbert. Oregon quarterbacks don't work in the NFL. They don't play any defense in the Pac-12. And I remember I kept saying over and over, but he's toolsy. I would always end, I would give him a bunch of compliment sandwiches. But instead of them being compliment sandwiches, they were constructive criticism sandwiches. So I would say something negative, and then I would give him, but he's toolsy. And then I would say something else negative, and I would smash it together, right? But I would always make sure he's toolsy, though. He's got every tool you're looking for. Drake May has every tool you're looking for. If he's got it upstairs, which sounds like he does, this is who I am. Let me explain to you who I am. When you're drafting this high, you should be swinging for the fences. Let me repeat that. When you're drafting this high, you should be swinging for the fences. Not looking to hit a double. We're not looking to bat for average at number 2. You look to bat for average when you're picking 17th. You're allowed to pick Kenny Pickett at 17 if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, or whatever pick they made Kenny Pickett at first rounder 2-3 years ago, whenever it was. You're allowed to do that. You're in a position where you can bat for average. When you're picking in the top 5, top 3, top 2, as we are, no. A double won't do. I'm not choking up on the bat looking to make contact. I'm swinging for the fences. And if I strike out swinging for the fences, so be it. But it won't be for a lack of trying. In essence, what I'm saying to you is, I'm not looking for the guy with the high floor and the ceiling that's not that much higher than the floor. If we get that guy, and that's who they deem to be the best player for this team moving forward, sign me up. But if you're asking me, your man Louie T, what I would do at number 2, I'm taking Drake May. Because Drake May gives me the best opportunity to have an elite quarterback 4 years from now. He gives me the best chance to have a guy that looks like Josh Allen or Justin Herbert. And I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels doesn't. But the floor and the ceiling for Jaden Daniels, pretty similar. He's not going to be a bust, I don't think, just because of his athleticism, right? You can win games with him where he might not have the best passing statistics that day, but he ran for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, and so that ended up powering you to a victory. Is that sustainable over 10 years, though? At some point, he's going to have to be cerebral from the pocket. Can he evolve and turn into that? Because right now, when he doesn't like what he sees, he takes off and he runs. And again, that's problematic for NFL defenses, especially if you get the right coordinator to harness his ability to run with his ability to pass, and you start calling things that really force the defense to have to make tough decisions. He can be dynamic. And if they decide to take him, I have no doubts that they'll turn him into a dynamic quarterback for us. But Drake May has the skill set and the talent to come into the NFL. And again, coaching is going to be important because he's got some bad habits and he's got some things he's got to clean up. But there aren't many guys in this year's draft class, or even in the league for that matter, that can do some of the things that he can do. There's a lot of skills that he possesses that guys just don't have. And because of that, I want the guy that gives me a chance to knock it out of the park. I might strike out. And again, this is where we talk about high ceiling, low floor, right? I get up there and I'm swinging out of my shoes with Drake May. If I make contact, oh, that baby's gone. We got ourselves a star. But if I miss 3 times, I'm going back to the dugout and we're looking for a quarterback in 3 years, right? But I'm willing to take that risk because I'm drafting 2nd overall. You know how bad you got to be to draft 2nd overall? When you get in this position, you shouldn't be looking for the safe pick. You should be looking for the home run. I'm not looking to make contact. I'm looking to knock the ball out of the park. Drake May and Caleb Williams gives you the best chance in this year's draft class to knock the ball out of the park and over the fence. The rest of those dudes, they're going to give you a chance to make contact. And one of them may actually hit it and knock it out of the park. But if they do it, it's going to be Jaden Daniels is more likely to hit an in the park home run than over the fence. And I say that figuratively and literally, right? With his speed and his ability to run, he's more likely to hit it down the third baseline. It trickles into the corner. It bounces off the wall. It's misplayed by the outfielder. It gets by him. He turns second and he sees that ball rolling slowly back towards the infield. And his helmet flies off as he's rounding third. And he's like, I'm not stopping. And he goes and he slides head first and he's safe at home plate. He's more likely to score that way. I'm trying to hit this bitch 478 feet. No doubt about it. The outfielder doesn't even move after he hears that bitch leave the bat. The sound alone lets him know this shit ain't coming back. Drake May and Caleb Williams give you the best opportunity to do that. So that's my list of the 7 best quarterbacks in this year's draft class. And I've already broken down 4 of the 7 that you see in front of you. You'll get the other 3 over the weekend. So be on the lookout for that. And then we'll move on to the next position, whatever you guys decide. And I'll put out a poll question, and you guys will give me your feedback there, and we'll go from there, right, as to what position we'll attack next. And I'll allow you guys to select the positions that we attack as we continue to move forward the draft, right? And now I think I'll knock down, 7 prospects at every position, and then we'll go to the next position and then if we got time to circle back and get some more guys knocked out, and then we will, right? In any event, I digress. Let's get to you guys' comments and how you feel about what I had to say, or how you feel about these quarterbacks. And I'm dying to know how you guys feel as well. So without any further ado, let's get to the comment section and see how you guys feel. Monster, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Monster, thank you for the super chat. Who writes, love the show, Louie. Makes the drive to work better. I'm glad, again, as I always tell people, I'm so glad that I can be a part of your day, and I'm so glad that I can help any aspect of your life. If I improve that, or I make it easier, or I make it more efficient, or whatever the case may be, I am so happy to be able to do that for you. That brings a huge smile to my face and to my heart. So thank you for the support, Monster. Really appreciate you. Who's cooking? Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, man, Lou, I appreciate you putting in the work and giving us all something to look forward to in the offseason. This is going to be a hell of a year upcoming from top to bottom. Let's get at this draft. And I'll tell you this much. I said it, before the offseason started, as we were, winding down what was a very disappointing finish to the season. I said, this is going to be the second biggest offseason in franchise history. Obviously, last year was the most important because we were getting rid of the worst owner in sports. So this offseason is the rebuilding. It's the laying the foundation of restoring what once was one of the most proud franchises in the entire NFL, and was one of the gold standards, if you can believe that. I know a lot of you can't even imagine that Washington was once viewed as one of the elite NFL franchises, but we're laying the foundation of trying to bring that back, this offseason. So this is definitely going to be a fun offseason, because honestly speaking, as much as I was running from this roster not being as bad, there's not a lot here. And this is a blank slate, essentially, that Adam Peters is coming into. And he really can do whatever he wants with this canvas. I mean, this is not an established roster. Who are we kidding? I don't think any of us felt like it was. I just didn't want to admit that this roster, it was a bunch of Rivera guys. And, those players fit what they wanted to do. But what we envision this team potentially being, it's just not enough talent here. It's not enough talent. John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, JP, writes, good to see you as always, Lou. Likewise, JP. Caleb Williams is the guy I want and strongly believe Washington is going to pursue him. But if we can't get him, I'll take Daniels or May. I want no parts of McCarthy or Penix. And you don't have to worry about that. It's not like we're drafting where the Giants are, 6th overall, and you got to take whatever table scraps are left, or you got to bust your ass to try to get up to 1, 2, or 3, which, again, if the Bears are taking Caleb Williams, which I assume they are, they're not trading the pick. Washington's definitely not trading out of 2. They're taking a quarterback. And the Patriots, more likely than not, aren't going to trade out of 3. They're taking a quarterback. So if you're a team like the Giants, you're at the mercy of the 3 teams at the top of the draft, because you got to hope that one of them is willing to move so you can come up and get one of the guys, or You've got to fall in love, convince yourself that one of the others, Knicks, Penix Jr., McCarthy, is the wave of the future. You've got to convince yourself of that. We don't have to worry about that. It's Williams, Daniels, or May for us. We get to decide. If the Bears go with Williams, then it's an easy decision. You picking from two guys, Daniels or May. Make a decision. I don't think McCarthy or Penix Jr. or Knicks or anybody else enters into that equation. So we're good. Video channel. Been a member for 7 months. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Drake May is my pick. The arm, the legs, pause. The ceiling sells it for me. Tight window passing is a must. And it's not the only thing he brings to the table, but having a strong arm allows you to get away with some things that others just simply cannot. And we watch it on a weekly basis during the NFL season. When you watch guys like Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, throw the football and you go, whoa, how did that one get in there? Well, not a lot of guys can do what those guys can do, and Drake May is one of those dudes that can do that. So I think it's that ability coupled with his athleticism. He can run. His legs are very useful, right? He's not one of these guys that is functionally mobile. No, he's an athlete. He comes from an athletic family. I talked about that in his Draft Prospects 101 breakdown. Like, he comes from an athletic bloodline. So he's an athlete. You put that together with his size and, all of the different abilities that he brings to the table, and he's young, so he's still moldable. There's a lot of upside, right? There's a lot that comes with that. There's an argument to be made for the guy with more experience. And if that's your speed, then Jaden Daniels is the guy that you're looking for. And Drake May only has 2 years of starting experience. It's not like he's got, I personally like my quarterbacks to have 30 some odd starts personally, but he's got 2. It's not 1. I'm at the point now where if you've only started 1 season in college football, you can't start for me in the NFL. I'm not drafting you, at least. I've seen too many of those dudes come in and fail. But if you've got 2 years, I've seen guys succeed with 2. 3 is where I think that's the sweet spot. If you started as a true freshman, you've played 3 years, I think that's the sweet spot. But you can't always get what you want. Noah Livingston, stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. Y'all know what to do. Show Noah some love. Noah, come on in here, man. Perfect time for you to join the squad. Mob, open your arms wide. Show Noah some love. Show him what it's like to be a member of the MOBB. Noah Livingston, welcome to the MOBB. Glad to have you. Navy Ramjet, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, good evening, brother. Good evening, Navy Ramjet. We have a long history of quarterback draft carnage going back to Heath Schuler. Regardless, I will spend too much on rookie cards happily. I got a sale on a Robert Griffin III rookie card, by the way, if you need some. Yeah, I'm going to pass on those. Thanks anyway, though. Probably should have gotten rid of those when you had a chance. Those never were more. Those probably were never more. What is the word I'm looking for? They were. I'll just settle for hot. Those cards were never more hot than his, right after his rookie season. Probably going into the playoffs, honestly. Once he snapped his leg in the playoffs, they lost a lot of value. right after he led Washington to the division, that's when you should have sold those things. Their stock was never going to be any higher than that. But I digress. We do have a lot of carnage, but that's not going to stop. That shouldn't stop you from swinging, right? Shouldn't stop you from taking another hack at it. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I've seen a lot of JD fans comping him to Joe Burrow, and I've gone back and forth with them about how they're not the same. But I noticed you comped them both to Deshaun Watson. There's something to it. So with Joe Burrow, this is the only thing that I feel like they have in common, right? And I think, so I'll say this, these two things. One, they both had this kind of meteoric ascension towards the top of the draft. That was the only reason that I put Jaden Daniels, and it went to LSU, right? Both transferred over from a different school to LSU. And it wasn't the first year that really sold people on them. I think both of them going into their final year at LSU were both third-round picks, right? I think Jaden Daniels was a day 2 pick. Joe Burrow was definitely a third-round pick going into that 2019 season where he erupted and had one of the greatest college football seasons I've ever seen from a quarterback. Jaden Daniels had a similar media. I mean, go look at all his numbers. Go look at his seasons. We're talking about a guy that never really had any more than 20 touchdown passes in any given season. And then he explodes for 40 in 1 year, right? Rushes for another, 10, 12, 14, whatever it was, and counts for 50 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. What? Yeah, it was kind of out of nowhere, which is what Joe Burrow's season kind of was. And so I think those two are similar in that regard. Now, to me, I comped Jaden Daniels to Deshaun Watson because of the arm talent and the mobility, right? Watson came into the league, and a lot of people tried to put him in this box as a one-read quarterback. When he doesn't like what he sees, he takes off. He did do a lot of that at Clemson, but he also was a little bit more adept at reading defenses than people gave him credit for. I think you could say the same for Jaden Daniels, but they do have that same ability to run. They do have a penchant for not liking what they see, tucking and running. And I'm talking about Watson coming out of Clemson. And I see a lot of similarities in the game. The only difference is their build, right? Watson's a little bit shorter, kind of squatty, right? 6'2", 220 or so. Jaden Daniels, 6'4", 210, right? So different body type, but very similar skill set. Arm isn't the strongest. Has wheels, dynamic wheels at that. Can hurt you in a multitude of ways. But when all else fails, and I remember saying this about Deshaun Watson when he came out, when all else fails, he'll trust his legs before he trusts anything else. And that's how I feel about Jaden Daniels. When it's all said and done, he trusts his legs before he trusts anything else. I'm not going to throw an interception using my legs. So I'm going to take off and run because they never fail me. As far as Joe Burrow is concerned, he was always looking to throw. So I don't think they're similar in that regard. Because even when he escapes, he's got athleticism. He's nowhere near the athlete, obviously. And that's not telling you anything that you don't already know. He's nowhere near the athlete that Jaden Daniels is. Okay? Burrow was always looking to extend the throw. My biggest knock on Joe Burrow coming out was that he didn't know when to let a play die. Sort of like what we talk about with Caleb Williams. Know when to say when. Burrow didn't have an issue taking the check down. Burrow didn't have an issue playing hero ball. His issue was he'd get out of the pocket. He'd extend. The defense won this one. Just throw it away, right? No, he wants to throw back across the field, across his body, into triple coverage, and it gets picked off. And you go, Joe, just don't do that. If I compare, and I don't remember who I compared Joe Burrow to. If you're telling me it was Deshaun Watson, I'll tell you why I probably did compare him to Deshaun Watson back then. Because that's, to me, looking at their games, they're not super similar in that regard. But Watson was having such a great start to his career. And I probably looked at his ascension and said Burrow can be that. Because Watson, I don't think a lot of people, it's so easy to look at Watson where he is now and his fall from grace. And Deshaun Watson was this close to being an NFL superstar quarterback. He was that close. This close in Houston. The man took the Texans to the NFC or AFC divisional round and was up on Mahomes and the Chiefs by like 17 points in the second quarter. He was this close. And then it all disintegrated. And I saw a lot of those qualities in Burrow in terms of what he could be in the league. But from a skill set standpoint, that if I compared Joe Burrow to Deshaun Watson, the two aren't the same. Jaden Daniels is a lot more like Deshaun Watson coming out of Clemson than Joe Burrow was. So I'll say it that way. Benjamin Slate, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Benjamin Slate writes, why do we have pick 4 round 2 and not pick 2? So how the NFL works a lot of times is they switch up the order if you have the same record. So Washington had the same record as the Patriots, and I think the Cardinals as well, right? If I'm not mistaken. They just had tougher schedules than we did. The Patriots and the Cardinals did. So once you get into that scenario, I'm not sure if they flip a coin to determine who goes where or if they just flip the order. But generally, if you have the same record, they're going to change it around. They're trying to make it as balanced as possible. So Washington gets the nod, strength of schedule wise, in round 1. Then in round 2, they may flip a coin to determine who gets that first, second round pick. And let's say they might say, all right, the team that was in second, which is New England, you go to the 2 spot in the second round, and Washington and Arizona flips a coin to see who goes, third. And then let's say Arizona won that, and so Washington goes back. I don't know how that process works. This is all I can tell you. If you have the same record, you'll see that they'll flip the positions in each round. So you won't be in the same spot. It's only when you separate yourself by being clearly worse than the teams behind you. Like Chicago, for instance, Carolina was worse than anybody else. So the Bears don't have to worry about Carolina doesn't have to worry about somebody leapfrogging them in the second round. They have the first pick of the second round, do the Carolina Panthers. They'll have the first pick in the third round. As long as they haven't traded it away, they'll have the first pick in the third and the fourth round, so forth and so forth, right? It's only when you have the same record do they switch it up, if that makes sense. Also, he says, not advocating for a trade, but our 2 seconds, what pick does that trade into round 1? About 20? I don't know. I'd have to look at I have a copy of the Jimmy Johnson trade chart. I have a copy of that. I'd have to look at it. But I do think Belichick has made some tweaks to the trade chart that people look at now. it's not that much different, but there are some tweaks that have been made to it. I don't know what the point value is on the 2 picks that we have in the second round. But again, it's not always about the chart. You use that as a reference point, but you can do different things to sweeten up a deal to get to wherever you want to go. So I don't know what the point value is and where that suggests we should be able to get to, but you know, there are things you can do. You could throw in a late round pick this year, a late round pick in the following draft, or you can throw in a player. There's things you can do to get to where you ultimately want to be if there's a player that you really covet. So I don't think that would be an issue. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Thank you for the support, as always, and your generosity. My guy Chris writes, "Hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always. Hope everything is all good in your neck of the woods." 2 questions. 1, how do you see Kingsbury offensive approach being similar between drafting Daniels versus May and different, and why? And 2, what teams not in the top 3 do you believe aggressively try and trade for QB and why? I think every single team that does not have a quarterback will be aggressive in trying to move up. I think it'll all be for naught because, as I just mentioned, as long as Chicago is taking Caleb Williams, which is the assumption right now, then nobody out of the top 3 is trading back because they all need quarterbacks. You know, this isn't a situation like Jacksonville, for instance, 2 years ago, when if that was a quarterback-rich draft class, the Jags could have made out like bandits because they had just drafted Trevor Lawrence the year prior. They didn't need a quarterback. They had the number 1 overall pick, but there were no quarterbacks. That was the draft with Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell and Bailey Zappi and, you know, Matt Corral and all of those guys and Malik Willis. And so nobody wanted Jacksonville's number 1 overall pick. But, you know, that's the kind of position that the Giants or the Falcons or the Raiders or the Vikings or one of those teams that desperately needs a quarterback, that's the situation they needed to have happen. And it almost came to fruition because the Bears, if they would have decided to stick with Justin Fields, they would have been open to trading back. But I think they're going to move on from Fields. And if I'm Atlanta, I'm going after Fields, like I said. And the beauty is you're not going to have to give up the 8th or 9th, whatever the pick is that Atlanta has, overall pick to get Justin Fields. You can give him a 2nd-round pick. And for the Bears, that's essentially getting their 2nd-round pick that they traded us in the Montez Sweat trade. They're getting it back, right? So if I'm Chicago, I'd do that deal all day long. And so I just don't see a team like the Giants being able to move up. They're going to either have to select the guy where they are. And to me, that probably isn't great value, but you can't wait if you're the Giants. You got to, I mean, similar to what they did with Daniel Jones. Remember, nobody was taking Daniel Jones except for probably dumb Washington had he fallen to us. Remember, they took Daniel Jones because they thought we were going to take him. So they took him like 5th or 6th overall. And everybody laughed at them because it was way too early for him. The only quarterback worth drafting that early in that year's draft was Kyler Murray. I was a Drew Lock fan, but he wasn't worth drafting in the top 10. We were sitting there at like 14 or 15 or 16. I would have been fine with Drew Lock going there, but not top 5. Damn sure not Daniel Jones, but you got to do what you got to do. If you feel like one of these quarterbacks is it, and you go and you get them. And that's what you do and you move on, right? So we'll see what happens. As far as Cliff Kingsbury and his offense and his approach being similar or different, I don't think he's going to necessarily have a vastly different approach with either quarterback. I think maybe because I think you can do a lot of the same things with both of them. Their skill sets are similar between their athleticism and their ability to throw the football. I think where you get into a huge difference is arm talent, obviously, with Drake May, and then the legs being a threat a little bit more so with Jaden Daniels. So I think if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, maybe there's a little bit more RPO with a Jaden Daniels, right? Because he's got a quicker release and his legs, read option, that sort of thing, gives the defense a little bit of pause. Using him as a runner a little bit more is something that I think you would be able to get away with. We saw him do that with Kyler Murray. So I know he could duplicate that here in Washington with Jaden Daniels, should he be the pick. I think if you're looking at it with Drake May, I think you're going to see him look to maybe spread defenses out a little bit more, allow him to kind of be a little bit more surgical back there, make decisions throwing the football because he can get it to different portions of the field that you may not necessarily trust Jaden Daniels to do that with, right? And I think personally there would be more deep shots with a Drake May because he can get it there. So I do think there would be some differences with that, but I don't know if it'll be drastically different. We did hear Cliff Kingsbury, and this is music to all of our ears, say that he's going to adjust and adapt his play calling to the talent that is here, and so I would assume he would do that with the quarterbacks, but I don't think it would have to be this drastic change, because as I mentioned, Drake May is an athlete, so he can move. Jaden Daniels, as we know, is one of the better athletes in the entire draft. And he can throw the football. And like I said, he can get it to all levels and all portions of the field. It's just not going to get there as expeditiously, right? It's not going to get there in the same amount of time as it would if Drake May's pulling the trigger. So that may limit some of the things that you may try to do, but we'll see, right? Only one way to find out. So I feel good about whatever quarterback we get. I can't state that enough. If they drafted Jaden Daniels, I'm going to be ecstatic. If they draft Drake May, I'm going to be ecstatic. If they draft Caleb Williams, I'm going to be ecstatic. So what I'm essentially telling you is there's almost no way that I can't be happy come draft day one. There's almost zero chance I'm walking away disappointed because I don't see them surprising me and trading the pick and trading back. They're definitely not staying at 2 and drafting anything other than quarterback. And I don't see them, surprising us and taking a J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix. They're not doing that. It's one of these 3 quarterbacks that they're taking. I feel good about all 3. So I feel good. I'm like Stephanie Mills. I feel good all over right now. Jado, been a member for 4 months. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "What up, Lou? What's up, Jay?" He says, "I agree with you. Drake is my guy at number 2. I'm siding with upside. Give me the guy with the highest upside. That it's cut and dry for me. It's not rocket science. I'm not looking to put together this crazy mathematical equation that leads me to Drake May. Give me the dude with the upside that's through the roof. Don't know if he'll ever hit it, but that's what we're striving for." Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris, once again, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Truly appreciate you for that. Y'all tell Chris thank you because this blessing is definitely going to help you in this draft season as we will continue to break down these prospects, and you'll be able to be a part of some of these streams. So shout out to my guy Chris for spreading the love and helping others join the MOBB. Once again, shout out to my guy Chris. Thank you so much for your generosity. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "Drake May, baby. I'm with you, Lou. Let Cliff Kingsbury coach him up. He's big and durable and got that cannon. Be prepared for JD to have a better start to his career, but hopefully May will move a tier above him in a couple years. And, I can't even say that will happen. It's more likely that it happens because what did we just talk about? Jaden Daniels is the safest pick to me at the quarterback position in this year's draft class. And with safe picks, generally you get immediate results, right? You get guys that come in, especially with his background, a guy that has over 50 starts in his collegiate career. Playing in the SEC doesn't hurt either against that level of competition. He's going to come in, and I expect him, depending on where he lands, and the prevailing thought is, if the draft goes the way that I think it's going to go, which is Caleb Williams, Chicago 1, Washington, Drake May 2, Jaden Daniels goes to New England, we'll see how that works. They don't have a ton of talent in New England, right? I'm not 100% sure he goes in there and tears it up. They don't have any receivers. They got tight ends. I don't know if they'll have all of those tight ends. Hunter Henry, I think, is a free agent. Mike Gesicki is definitely a free agent. So I don't even know what their tight end position is going to look like. They got some work to do, but they got some cap space. We'll see what they decide to do, but they need a lot of work. So I don't know if he goes in there and tears it up or not, but I wouldn't be shocked if he looked a lot better right out of the gates, to your point. But I'm all in on whomever they take. But, again, the upside with Drake May is undeniable, and that's where I'm siding. Right? I'm swinging for the fences. So, yeah, we're on the same page. Just Andre, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB for 25 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, our receivers will make it easier for either of the quarterbacks. What's funny is our receivers have taken, of all the positions, of all the players that have taken the biggest hit due to last season's failure, specifically Eric Bieniemy, it's our receivers. They took a beating last year, even from our own fan base. They took a beating. And McLaurin, remember what kind of conversation we were having with the rest of the division about where Terry was prior to this season, right? We were putting him up there with CeeDee Lamb and AJ. We put those guys, AJ especially, ahead of him. But we were having a conversation about CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee went off this year. Now there's no conversation, right? We felt like he was better than Smitty. That was debatable, but we were putting him above everybody except AJ Brown at the time. Nobody's debating. AJ's better than him. CeeDee's better than him. Devontae's probably better than him at this point. That's the way that he's being viewed right now. Jahan was supposed to have this breakout year. There are fans that want him gone, which total mind blow. Like, what? Are you serious right now? No position took a bigger hit after last season's debacle than the receivers. They're still really good. Believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, that's still a really good group. Even if you take Curtis Samuel out, which I would assume then you would be adding someone via the draft or free agency. My guess would be the draft. But whatever the case, that's a really good group of receivers. And you're going to add to it. I think our receivers are going to help. But we need more. We need more at the tight end position. We need to add another receiver, especially if Curtis is back and they did nothing at receiver, I'd be fine. I'd be fine. Because you're going to bring Diami back more likely than not. And in this offense, Diami's going to get some run, right? You would have to upgrade tight end, though. That's not optional. You'd have to do that. Even with Amani Rodgers coming back, who I really like and I'm intrigued by, you still have to upgrade the tight end position. You do that, and I feel like this is a really formidable group that will cause some problems very early on. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Red Wings 01 writes, I owe you an apology, Lou. For what? Says, you tell us never presume how you feel. After the mob, I got the impression you like JD over Drake May. Commented so. No problem with that. I just shouldn't have spoken for you. Oh, man, you don't need to apologize for that. I thought something was seriously wrong. I was like, wait a minute, what happened? No, but I always tell you guys, I don't like speaking for anyone because I don't know how you feel. The only way you know how someone feels is if they tell you, right? I hadn't told you guys how I felt. I saw a lot of people commenting. That's not going to bother me, though. That I laugh at that because you think you know, but you have no idea. I get upset when people speak for me about other things. Like, in the grand scheme of things, this is trivial. We're talking about sports, right? People start talking about real life shit and they start thinking they can speak for me. That's when I have an issue, right? That's when I get perturbed and I have something to say. This right here, the way that I spoke may have led you to believe I was leaning one way or the other. Subconsciously, I might have done that on purpose, right? Just to kind of keep you off balance. I don't think I went out of my way to show favoritism one way or the other, but it could have, I guarantee you, if you go back and watch a lot of the stuff that I said, it probably did feel like a heavy slant towards Jaden Daniels because he's the safer prospect, right? I talked about the missing the layups, and I know that's a big issue for me. You know, missing layups. Both of them, to me, have ball placement issues, so nobody gets the upper hand there. But Jaden Daniels doesn't miss as many layups as Drake May does, right? But Jaden Daniels also didn't have to be Superman in that LSU offense because he had studs that he was playing with. Versus Drake May, he had a stud running back this year, right? But he didn't have a big-time offensive line. He didn't have the weapons at the receiver. How many times did we watch the film last night and I say, catch the damn ball. Help your quarterback out. Make him right. I'm watching these LSU dudes make Jaden Daniels right even when he's wrong. I'm asking these North Carolina receivers, and they're not capable. I'm watching Spencer Rattler, and he's throwing some shit up to this dude named Leggett. I think I said his name right. I might have messed it up. This dude is legit. This number 17 guy. I don't know what year he's in. I don't know if he's in this year's draft or if he's a minor. If he's a minor, I apologize. I shouldn't have been watching him. You know how we do. We respect minors, and we don't eyeball minors. Okay? That dude was out there catching every goddamn thing. 50-50 balls, they were 80-20 balls. Pause. Make your quarterback right. They didn't make Drake May right a lot of times. So it could have felt like I was leaning towards Jaden Daniels, but I'm all about the home run. Chicks dig the long ball. All right. I'm all about hitting home runs, man. Singles are cool. Doubles are better. Triples are rare. I'm looking for the home run, though. Swinging out of my shoes. We at 2, man. We ain't at 12 or 16 or 22. We at 2. We need a stud. We need a guy. We need a dude. No need to apologize. You're good, man. Zo Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I don't mind sitting May for a few. Is that crazy? So, no. Okay, you're not crazy for saying that. Are you crazy for thinking that that is a possibility? Yeah, you're crazy for that. You draft a guy. We live in a day and age now where quarterbacks that are selected in the top 5 are expected to start right out of the gate. Find me the last top 5 quarterback not named Trey Lance. That was a really tricky situation because when they drafted him knowing that they still had Jimmy Garoppolo and that he didn't have to play. Okay. that because he was so inexperienced. Like, we're talking about a guy in Trey Lance that only started 1 year in college football, and it wasn't even in Division I, right? So, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't at a Power 5. It wasn't. He was playing at North Dakota State. So they wanted to be careful and take their time with him. Outside of him, show me the last dude that was a top 5 pick that didn't play right out of the gates, who didn't start week 1. The Colts drafted Anthony Richardson. What did we all say? Oh, well, he'll need some time. You know, he's raw. They announced him as the starter like the second day of training camp. Like, we're not even going to wait. We're not even going to bullshit around. It was supposed to be a camp battle between him and Gardner Minshew, and they said, to hell with the battle. He's shown us enough already. We starting him. Because really, at the end of the day, you're only going to find out what you have by playing them. As much as I liked how the Chiefs handled Mahomes, or the Bengals handled Carson Palmer, or I think sitting a guy for 3 years is crazy, like the Packers did with Rodgers and Jordan Love. But if you can get away with it, great. We don't have a future Hall of Famer, keeping a guy on ice. You draft whomever. Drake May, it was the guy you said at 2. He's starting week 1, barring some kind of craziness. He's starting week 1. But you're not crazy for being comfortable with that notion, because we've seen it work in this league. It's just, you're crazy for thinking that could happen. I don't know, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. You didn't say that you think that's what's going to happen. You said, are you crazy for being comfortable with him sitting for a couple of years? No, you're not crazy for that. If you think that Washington would entertain that, you're crazy. Then I could say you're crazy for thinking that. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, well, Louie T, I was wrong about how you would feel when it comes to the quarterbacks. I have myself changed my view of Jaden Daniels and really hope they would trade Sam so he can let his talents shine. So I went into this process as open-minded as I think I've ever went into a quarterback process, because I watched enough college football to be dangerous. I am not a college football fan. So let me be abundantly clear. Like, I'm not going out of my way to watch college football. If it's on and I don't have anything to do, I'll turn it on, I'll watch. But I'm not obsessing over the next 4 or 5-star recruit that Notre Dame's getting their hands on. I'm not sitting there at the edge of my seat on signing day hoping that Notre Dame has a top 10 recruiting class. I don't give a shit. I don't care, right? I care about the NFL. I care about my favorite team. I'm all over this shit, as you can see, right? So I'd be lying to you if I sat here and told you I know all of this stuff about all these players and this, that, and the third. I've watched enough to be dangerous, but the tape doesn't lie. And when you sit down and you actually watch, that's where I get all of my information and data from. It's sitting down and watching. And I went in with an open mind, and I had people on one side of the fence and one end of the spectrum telling me, you're not going to like these guys. They all stink. We're better off keeping Sam, trading a pick, or getting an offensive lineman. And I had guys like John Bueller on the other side saying, bro, all 3 of these guys are really good. You can't go wrong. And he even went as far as to tell me Drake May and Caleb Williams, high ceiling, also lower floor. Jaden Daniels, safer pick, high floor, solid ceiling, but you know what you're getting. As Daniel Jeremiah would say, he comes in clear packaging. You can see right in, and you know what you're getting from Jaden Daniels. The other 2, not so much. You don't know. Surprise! I'm willing to take that surprise, right? So I said all of that to say this. I thought that these guys could be good. I wasn't sure all 3 of them would be good, and to the point where I would feel comfortable with all 3 of them. I'm so glad that I do. And now we wait and we see. And I feel like it's going to be Drake May, to be honest with you. Not because I would take Drake May, but just because the upside. I think you always side with, especially in the draft, you tend to side with the guy that gives you the best chance to have an all-pro quarterback. We'll see if they go in that direction or not. As far as Sam is concerned, I don't know if they're going to move Sam or not. I don't know if there's benefit to doing that or what. I don't know if drafting his best bud and bringing him here is going to be an awkward situation in terms of the quarterback room, or if that would be great, having those two guys, you know, working together every day, best friends, rooting each other on, even though both of them would love to play. That may make for an even better and stronger and tighter quarterback room. Who knows? Only one way to find out. The one and only Bravo. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, although I'm excited about our staff, I'm still a little skeptical about Kingsbury as OC. However, I'll trust the process and hope for the best. And look, a lot of these moves can and probably should be met with skepticism. We're excited because of the prospects of a lot of these coaches coming in here because it's new, it's different, the approach is different. We just came from 4 years of buddy ball, bringing in your buds from your last failed attempt and hoping it's different this time around. We just sat through. So anything that's on the other end of the spectrum, we're going to get excited. That's why we're excited. Some of that is it's different, it's new, it's fresh, it's a breath of fresh air. Some of it is, hey, these dudes are actually established coaches who have credentials, who've cut their teeth in this league and have proven to be great teachers. And then some of it is, hey, we actually doing it in a different way. There was nobody on the Rivera staff. There was nobody other than Sean McVay on the Gruden staff that we looked at and said, hey, he could be a head coach in this league, or he could be an up-and-coming coordinator or fill in the blank. We had a bunch, I don't want to demean these coaches. They didn't do anything. We had a bunch of guys who were Jags as coaches. And this is the first time in a long time, since the Shanahans, that we have a staff that has been put together with a healthy mixture of teachers and young up-and-coming coaches that could ascend in their league ranks. And if they do, it means that we've been successful. And you want that type of success because with that success usually comes winning and winning big. The 49ers don't have a Super Bowl to show for it, but they've got 4 NFC championship appearances in 5 years, and they've got 2 Super Bowl trips in 5 years to show for the success of all their coaches and front office members being poached away from their organization. We kill for opportunities to play for a Super Bowl, for a trip and a chance to go to the Super Bowl. We'll kill for that. The ultimate goal is to win it, though. We'd be miserable if we got there 2 times in 5 years and didn't win anything. But damn, can we get there? Can we win a playoff game? Can we get to the playoffs 2 years in a row? Can we have a winning record 2 years in a row? Skepticism is fair. With every single hire that has been made, including Adam Peters, I don't have any skepticism when it comes to him. But for somebody else that says, I don't care what his name is or where he came from, show me here, touche. I got no issues with that. Derek B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, you didn't show us anything that puts Drake May over Jaden Daniels. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I showed you 2 games for each of them. I wanted to give you a good representation of Good and bad. I think I did a better job of that with Drake May than I did Jaden Daniels, because I could have reached in there and grabbed a game where he wasn't as good, and that could have swayed you, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was just to give you a little bit of flavor from all of these guys, the good and the bad, and let it be what it is. That Minnesota game for Drake May, and Red Wing 01 said it best, is the and I felt the exact same way, which is why I showed it, is the perfect microcosm of Drake May's career at UNC. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of not so good, but the good outweighs the bad, and it's good enough to the point where you're like, I need to see more. Jaden Daniels had one wow throw that I saw, maybe two if you count the touchdown pass he had against Bama. I want to say it was in 2022. He had two wow throws that I watched. There weren't many. You know, he wasn't sticking throws in there. In this league, he got away with a lot of soft tossers you didn't see, because I didn't expose you to that, right? A lot of balls that just hung in the air forever as he's throwing out breaking routes. He's not getting away with that shit at the next level, especially if the ball placement isn't, he doesn't tighten that shit up. Whereas with Drake May, yeah, there were some mistakes in there. Yep, he missed some layups, no doubt about that. But boy, you know, in that Minnesota game alone, there were a couple of throws where you go, wow, that is pretty special, right? And there are more, right? There are more of those. So you may not have seen enough. I watched enough to feel comfortable with the upside that he possesses. Again, if you want to be on the safe side, Jaden Daniels is your man. If you're not looking for the bustable component, right? The combustible aspect of, hey, this dude could be awesome, but he could also stink. Jaden Daniels is your man. I'm not looking to be safe here. Nothing about having the second overall pick and taking a quarterback speaks to me in a manner that says, hey, do the safe thing. Everything says, bro, go for the gusto. Go for broke. Put all of your chips on red. Let it ride. That's what I'm doing. You're not wrong. If you went into that situation and that film study with Jaden Daniels at the top, nothing I showed you probably changed your mind. Obviously, taking Caleb Williams out of the equation. Nothing probably changed your mind. That's fine. But if you went in, open mind, both of them were even, and you were looking for things that could elevate one over the other, Jaden Daniels' legs, far superior to that of Drake May. May's arm talent and the ability to make things happen off schedule with his arm. So in the pocket and out of it, which is where most of your plays in this league are going to come. His legs being electrifying and dynamic, that's going to be a very small part of what he brings to the table. He better be able to throw the football consistently from the pocket and outside of it when things break down. We didn't see the outside of the pocket component, or at least I didn't. I can't speak for you. I didn't see enough of it on tape. There's also issues and a conversation about him throwing over the middle of the field. It wasn't the best, and he didn't do it a ton. And when he did do it, it wasn't very good, right? So there's that component. I've already told you the arm talent doesn't suggest that he'll be able to throw outside the numbers very often, especially from the opposite hash. So there's already little things that you can look at and say, hey, we may have to do little things to make him comfortable. Again, this is where coaching comes into play because of the skill set and the talents that he does possess. And I think it was Cliff Kingsbury. It might have been Joe Witt Jr. One of them said something, always has my senses tingling, right? But Joe Judge got me like this too. So I'm a little careful with this now. But I'm always a proponent of don't talk to me about what a guy can't do. All right. We see that enough. We hear that enough. Tell me what he can do, and let's accentuate that. And if we get Jaden Daniels, okay, he's been struggling with this. He's been, all right, what does he do well? Let's do that. And we'll gradually get him better at some of the things that he's not doing. But as of right now, give me the guy that has the ability to do everything. That's Drake May. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wings writes, I kind of did peg you for a Drake May guy before the mob, but I let the games you chose sway my perception. I'm not always the sharpest tool in the shed. I think you're selling yourself short. I've always pegged you as a pretty sharp guy. Our conversations are always pretty good, right? I have good back and forth with you, banter, even when we don't agree. The points that you make are ones that I take into consideration. I go, I can see that. Like, yeah, now that makes a lot of sense, you know? So, again, I may have misled you, and subconsciously I may have done that intentionally. I didn't do that purposefully, though. That wasn't at the forefront of my mind. Like, I'm going to trick them. I just may have done that by the way I was talking, but make no mistake about it. When you're drafting this high, again, I've said this a million times already on tonight's stream, swinging for the fences. Smack City, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Smack City writes, I get the concern for the amount of picks to get Caleb Williams, but what is it going to cost if we don't get him? Caleb Williams' skill set is worth the picks. Bring him home. So here's, to me, this is an exercise in futility. If he's available and you love him, and I'm not talking about you specifically, Smack City, or me. I'm talking about the team, the organization. If Adam Peters, we know Cliff Kingsbury loves the kid. He's already said it. And he said, when they asked him, what are you looking for in a quarterback? He said, the guy in Kansas City is pretty good. 15, right? He coached him. He coached both of those guys. He knows. Caleb Williams, he vouches for Caleb Williams. Take him in a heartbeat. If Adam Peters feels the same way and the Bears make him available or make the pick available, then you do whatever you got to do to get him. And no amount of picks is going to dissuade you. If this is the guy you think can be the next Patrick Mahomes, what are we talking about? Excuse me. What are we talking about? I've told you personally that I don't know if I'm willing to give up what it's going to take. Because if you're Chicago, you got everybody by the scrotum if you decide to trade the pick. Oh, my God. And if Chicago makes it so that, and this is what I tried to explain to you, my guy Derek B tried to argue with me, and I didn't understand where he was coming from, because, like, you don't have a leg to stand on in this argument, Derek B. And me and him go back and forth all the time. And usually I can see his points. He's off on this one. Because if the Bears decided to trade the number 1 overall pick, I don't care about the other 15 instances where 1 and 2 made an exchange in picks. This isn't those situations. And because there are so many bidders, if the Bears say we don't have to be in a position to draft Marvin Harrison Jr., we just want to get the most we can out of this number 1 overall pick. That means they could be willing to go back to 6 where the Giants are. They could be willing to go back to 8 or 9 where the Falcons are. They could even be willing to go back as far as 13 with the Raiders, or 16 or 17 where the Vikings are. If they're opening themselves up to that, where they're letting any and everybody in, what are we talking about, man? They're gonna get so much for that pick. And again, even though going back to 6 or 8 or 9 or 13 would require them to get more, the fact that that option exists, they're going to then tell Washington, yeah, you're sitting at 2, but I can get this from the Giants at 6. How bad do you want Caleb Williams? Because they're offering me a swap of 1s this year, a 1 next year, a 2 this year, and a 4 next year. You coming with that kind of package or no? Because if not, I'm going back to 6. And if you really want them, then you gotta ante up. So the question becomes, how bad you want it? How bad you want the option? But to me, this isn't even a conversation worth having, which is why I don't, because they're not trading the pick until we find out that the pick is on the table and they're open to all options. And we've been told that they're listening, but the deal is going to have to blow them away and knock their socks off. That means they're not really listening. If like they're really looking for someone to be like, yo, I give you 3 first-round picks for them on some, Russell Wilson type bullshit. Like, ain't nobody doing that shit. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't think anybody's doing that. This is why I don't think this conversation merits a ton of response from me in particular, but I just don't think it merits a ton of time. Because I don't see him being available. I don't see that pick being available. Maybe Ramjet. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Lou, you must have been grading Zach Wilson's dating habits and not his QB skill to be that high on him. LOL. I'm outside no matter the pick. Zach was a bad boy at BYU, man. And I fell into the trap. The ability to throw off platform, the athleticism. He was pinpoint accurate at BYU. There was just so many things to like about what he did. And I'm a sucker for guys that take programs and put them and strap them to their back. At one point, he had BYU, undefeated and in the top 15 and, surging. I fell into that trap with Drew Lock. He turned around that Missouri program that was in the dumps and toilets, when he got there. So I'm a sucker for guys like that. And he had swag. So did Drew Lock. I think that gets me too. But I've learned. I told you I've learned over the years. A lot of that cosmetic shit doesn't move me anymore. Give me the guy like Jaden Daniels who is essentially emotionless on some Eli Manning shit. Like, give me that dude. I ain't even tripping. He scores a 67-yard touchdown. He ain't dancing. He tosses the ball to the official. Like that whole, swag and, Drew Lock, all that shit got me back in 2019. That shit don't move me no more, man. I learned my lesson. So you live and you learn. Zach Wilson got me. And he won't be the last quarterback to get me either, right? This is a quarterback. When you're talking quarterbacks in particular, it's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot. King of the North. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, King of the North. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Adam Peters may prefer JD if all things are equal after interviews and pro days. I've heard him talk about how the Lance Purdy situation in San Francisco taught him the value in experienced quarterbacks. I'd be happy with JD even though I prefer Drake May. And I brought that up earlier tonight when I talked about the experience piece. That's something that I myself have started to value more as the years have progressed. And we've seen some of these quarterbacks with more college football experience come in and be more successful in the NFL than the guys who didn't have it. So that's a part of the decision-making process. And to your point, they may get through this process just like they did with the coaching search, right? We all thought it was Ben Johnson. He was the hot, flashy, new shiny toy. And we thought they were going to go out and do whatever it took to get that toy, right? And then they told us, and we weren't listening, right? Because this is what we do. Eric Bieniemy came in here and told us, I don't give a shit about your stats. And we didn't listen because we heard what we wanted to hear. And Adam Peters said, We're going to do a thorough search, and we're going to get the best guy for the job. And we didn't believe that. We thought the best guy for the job was Ben Johnson, and to hell with what else you're talking about. And then they went out and hired Dan Quinn, right? We could be Drake May upside, yeah, and they could be thinking experience, because of the experience, as you mentioned, that he had, not just with the situation with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, but you got to go all the way back to Denver. He was a part of Paxton Lynch as well. Okay. So another guy, not as much experience, high upside, right? Tons of measurables and raw ability, stunk it up at the NFL level. So Drake May could give him visions of Paxton Lynch all over again. And he's like, nah, I'm not doing that shit again. You never know. We don't know where he's coming from. But again, as an evaluator, you're taught to erase all of that shit. Don't scout the helmet, and don't scout guys that you scouted in the past and put their baggage on these guys. You wipe the slate clean and you evaluate the guy, and you give him the ability to sell him to you off of his merits alone, right? And then you talk to him, get to know him, find out how important football is to him, and how invested and dedicated is he to being the best version of himself. And then you figure out, is this guy the right fit for our organization and what we're looking for as a leader? These are the things we can't know. We can't know these things. We have to just trust that they'll make the right decision. You could be absolutely right, and he could go. And if he picks Jaden, I'm not tripping. I already told you. I feel good. I've never been in this position before as a fan where any of three, first of all, in my entire fandom, I think Washington has chosen. I've never watched Washington have the number one overall pick in any draft in my life, ever. Okay, we've never been bad enough to have the number one pick. Now, I've seen them draft second multiple times. And I can say I've never felt comfortable with three different scenarios playing themselves out at two. If we didn't take Chase Young, I would have been pissed in 2020. Pissed. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, LeVar Arrington was the second pick of the 2000 draft for Washington, I believe. Could be wrong. He could have been third or fourth. I think he was the second pick. I would have been pissed if we didn't take LeVar Arrington. There were other talented players in that draft. I wanted LeVar Arrington, okay? I will be happy with any of these three quarterbacks at number two. And if they decide to trade up, you're not getting Caleb Williams at two. And I've been adamant about that. If you're getting Caleb Williams, he will be the number one pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Hands down, no debate, no discussion. So if you're getting Caleb Williams, that means you had to go up to number one to get him. And if they did that, I'd be fine with that too. But if you stay at two, you're picking between Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and I'm happy with either one of those guys and either one of those scenarios playing out. But you're not wrong, King of the North. That's something to consider. It's definitely something to consider. Lang Hughes, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, agree with JD having the highest floor skill set wise, but frame injury risk negates it. If that makes sense, DM's Drake May's ceiling is what every team dreams of. Obvious pick. I won't say it's the obvious pick because, again, it's all preference based. Somebody else could look at Jaden Daniels and see upside through the roof with him. But I think most people who level-headedly come into this process and evaluate these players will come to the same conclusion, which is if we're talking just off of raw ability, upside, youth, things of that nature, the upside is greater with that of Drake May. I don't worry about Jaden Daniels' size as much as others do until it becomes an issue. He really didn't get hurt in college. He didn't miss any games in college. The man started every single game of his collegiate career, going all the way back to ASU. So I don't have an issue with his size. Till it becomes an issue, it's not for me. But that's just me. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the North writes, JD had a top 5 O-line and the best wide receiver group in college football. That might account for the stat explosion this year. Not saying that he didn't get better, but just food for thought. But those same dudes were there last year too. And he didn't do what he did this year. So I don't know. There's probably plenty of the offensive line was really good. We watched the tape. Dude was standing back there building a house on multiple occasions, so he was definitely afforded plenty of time to do things that some of the other quarterbacks weren't. But as far as the best wide receiving core in the nation, I don't know, man. Washington might have something to say about that with a Dunze and Polk and some of those other dudes that they had, man. They went about 4 deep. LSU probably was about 3 deep. Washington went probably about 4 deep. Then they also, I think their tight ends probably cancel each other out. You might be right, though. I mean, Washington probably ain't going to have, they're not going to have 2 first-round pick receivers. LSU has a chance to have 2 first-round pick wide receivers. So, yeah, that explosion was crazy, though. But I said the same thing about Joe Burrow, right? Like a lot of those dudes, the only guy I think that was different the next year was Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase, but I think he was there the year before, I think, because Chase, he had one more year after Burrow left, COVID hit, and he pretty much sat out, and then I think he went into the draft. So he would have had to have been, had to have been there the year before. I think he was there the year before, but whatever. Big Daddy Butts, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, if Caleb Williams say he don't want to go to Chicago, would the trade be less expensive if we draft Drake May or JD? If Caleb Williams didn't want to go to Chicago, he would let the Bears know that before the draft. They wouldn't draft him and then he refuses to go to Chicago. That's not how that works. Because the only way the Bears would be in a desperate spot at that point is if they traded away Justin Fields, then drafted Caleb Williams, and then there's an issue. At that point, they would need a quarterback, and then you could probably get him for a lot less, right? If you've already drafted a guy and you're willing to switch, similar to the way the Chargers and the Giants handled it with Eli and Phillip Rivers, right? Eli Manning made it abundantly clear from the word go, I'm not playing for the Chargers organizations. So the Chargers took him 1 overall. They told the Giants, you take Phillip Rivers, and then we can make the swap. But what I don't want to do is trade back with you, allow you to come up, draft Eli 1, and then somebody swoops in front of us and gets Phillip Rivers, and now we're screwed. So what we'll do is we'll take Eli. He don't have a choice of saying the matter. If he don't want to play football, then he won't play. But if you don't get Phillip Rivers at 4, I'm not making a deal with you. I then want to talk to the team that drafted Phillip Rivers because that's the guy that I want. So it could turn into one of those situations. But again, he would have to let Chicago know because they have options. They'll know. So I don't see the price coming down. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Right. So where do you think some of these other QBs will go? I'd like to see Knicks unite with Sean Payton in Denver. Penix go to Minnesota. That'd be fun. That's you're pretty much right where I am. I've always said Bo Nix strikes me as a Sean Payton type of quarterback, Drew Brees type skill set, with the quick release. He's a master of the underneath throw already, as we saw in college. Just set the NCAA record for highest completion percentage in NCAA history. He'd be the perfect fit for Sean Payton's offense. That's the perfect place for him. And I think Denver does not have a first round pick, still paying for the Russell Wilson trade. And so they could be in quite a quandary if other teams are high on Bo Nix. But that, to me, is the best landing destination for him. Penix, I think would be, I think Minnesota would be a good fit for him. Now, you got to take into consideration the offense that they run in Minnesota. They run in a heavy under center, pseudo Shanahan type of outside zone, play action fake type offense. That's not really who he is. But I'm not saying that's not who he could become, but that's not who he's been. So I don't know if that's a great fit for him or not. I really think that of all the quarterback needy teams, you got to see where Fields lands. That'll take one of those teams off the board. I'm thinking Atlanta right now, but don't discount some of these other teams. I think did the Raiders get Chip Kelly? If Chip Kelly is in Vegas, I'm not sure about that. I could be tripping. I know he left and took a job somewhere else. It may have been college. He's an offensive coordinator. It may not have been the Vegas Raiders. I don't think. Matter of fact, I know it ain't the Raiders. They went and got. I think they got the ex-Bears offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. Was Waldron? He's in Seattle. He was in Seattle. Did he go to Vegas? Am I tripping? I can't remember. I think he'd be a better fit, he being Michael Penix Jr. in Vegas, though. So Shane Waldron is in Chicago. I think they got the former Bears offensive coordinator who they fired. He's in Vegas. Whatever the case, they've all run some semblance of the air raid. I think Michael Penix Jr. would be a better fit in Vegas. JJ McCarthy is interesting because depending on where you put him, like, to me, he'd be a great fit, say, somewhere like Pittsburgh. I think he could also work in Minnesota. Now, I don't know if he's going to be as aggressive as they need him to be attacking that third level of the field, but he's capable. I think McCarthy would be a good fit in Minnesota. He's got experience under center. He can throw to all three levels. Not going to turn it over, which was an issue last season they had once Kirk was no longer in the lineup. It's going to be interesting to see what teams decide to do. It really will be. I think Bo Nix to Denver is spot on, though. We are here on that one. Miss P, thank you. Raiders have Luke Getsy. That was the former Bears. I couldn't think of his name. Former Bears coordinator that got fired. That's who they have in Vegas. Luke Getsy. Waldron went to Chicago, which is what I talked about, them playing it straight down the middle so that they could get Williams or Fields. Either way, they would be fine, right? So, CJ Shoots Photo. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, hypothetically imagine all 2023 games replayed with Jaden Daniels put on the North Carolina roster and Drake May on the LSU roster. How differently would we see these quarterbacks? One, that's a hell of a game to play. It's a hell of a game to play. I'll just say this. North Carolina's offensive line wasn't as great, so you would have seen Jaden Daniels' legs on full display. And we would have still probably felt the same way about him. He would not have had the same caliber of receivers. I don't know how much that changes how we would have felt about him. Impossible to know. Which is why I don't really like playing this game. But since you asked, obviously you put Drake May at LSU, better protection, doesn't have to play hero ball as much. So maybe you don't see him taking as many risks, although I think that might just be a byproduct of him having a big arm and thinking, I can squeeze it in there. But guys win more at LSU. So there are easier windows to throw into. He would have been a probably much more efficient quarterback. Who knows? You know, what he would have done with a better supporting cast. Hard to say. Hard to say. Excuse me. Would he have won the Heisman Trophy? Let's just say that. I don't know. I don't know if he throws 40 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I don't know if he does that. Big Bad Wolf Beatty. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Big Bad Wolf Beatty. What is this thing doing here the entire time? Anyway. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Metaphor. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, roll the dice and give me any of the 3. Trade with New England for, I don't know who that is. For capital, I'm guessing that's what that was supposed to be. For capital. You're assuming New England, you're assuming New England isn't cool with just getting whatever falls to them at 3. I liken their position to that of the 49ers back in 2021 when they traded up to 3 and they were like, whatever falls to us, we cool, right? We don't have any say-so. We know Jacksonville's taking Trevor Lawrence. The likelihood is the Jets are taking Zach Wilson. And if Trey Lance is there, we're taking him. We're cool. If the Jets surprise us and take Trey Lance or Mac Jones or Justin Fields, we'll take Zach Wilson. Like, we'll be good either way. I think the Patriots find themselves in a similar spot. Like, I'm not giving you anything to move up because I don't think the difference between the 2 quarterbacks is great enough for us to give up what it's going to take for us to move up. Now, it might not take a whole hell of a lot, but when you're a team like New England, just like we are, you're rebuilding. You don't really want to give away valuable draft assets. Now, again, if you truly believe in a quarterback more than another one, then you would do whatever it takes to get that guy. And if New England feels strongly about Drake May, more so than we do, and we're like, yo, we'll take JD or Drake May. And New England's like, no, we don't want anybody else but Drake May. Then you would use that leverage against them and you would get what you can get, move back one, and you'll still get one of the 2, and you won't care that you're getting Jaden Daniels. You might have been taking him at 2 anyway. They don't know that. then in that case, you could move back and get something. But you're assuming that the Patriots have a hard-on for one of the two quarterbacks, and you can't make that assumption right now. Big Bad Wolf Beatty. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I didn't say nothing in the last one because I was trying to be peaceful, but if I don't see Daniel's name at 2 when we pick, I'm fighting all y'all. So you woke up this morning and you chose violence. Why you want to go and do that, huh? Why you want to go and do that Come on, BD, man. Can't we all just get along, as a wise man once said? Here's what I hope, all jokes aside. Clearly, your team, Jaden Daniels. This is all I could hope for. I feel like a civil rights leader here. We may not all agree on the methodology, right? Some people were Team Malcolm X by any means necessary. Some were nonviolent resistance with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Whatever it didn't matter. You just wanted the end result, which was civil rights, right? Unity, peace, harmony, all living as one, being treated as equals. I hope that no matter who the selection is, you might be Team JD, you might be Team Drake May, they go in the opposite direction, whatever. Some of you are stuck on Caleb Williams. It ain't happening, more likely than not. All I ask is that whomever they draft, you support them. Even if you didn't want them, just support them. You can point your finger and wag later on if they don't work out and the other guy does that you wanted. You can say, see. Do that 3-4 years down the road. We'll all be listening and we'll give you your credit when it's due, but don't be one of those fans. I beg of you that if they don't draft the guy you want them to draft, now you hate the guy that they draft and you're rooting against him. That to me makes zero sense. Don't be that guy. That's all I ask. You can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, you're going to do whatever you want. I don't want any smoke, man. I don't want any smoke. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Giants got caught up in Italian Heineke and find themselves in QB purgatory. May or Daniels, glad to see a staff will collaborate with the new QB. I said it in the moment, and Giants fans laughed at me, and I wanted to beat them. But once I saw where the season was going, by the time we played them the second time around, the season was on life support at that particular moment. I thought we were going to beat them, though. I never thought they would beat us, especially with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. But once I saw the way that game was going, I wanted them to beat us. I wasn't sure at that point. The Giants looked like one of the worst teams in football. Until they beat us, which gave them like this second lease on life, and it gave them a second win that allowed them to win like 3 games in a row, including beating the Green Bay Packers on a Monday night. Until they beat us, they were looking like they were going to end up with the number 2 pick in the draft. And I didn't want that because we weren't that much better. And when you look at the Giants, the thing that's probably holding them back the most, people can talk about their offensive line. They don't have the best skill position players, all of that good, but their quarterback position stinks. And they clean that up, and who knows what they could turn into. We've already seen what Brian Daboll can do with competent play at the quarterback position. Now, he had to cook some shit up to get Daniel Jones to be as efficient as he was that first year. And it was dink and dunk city, buddy. Boy, it was some nickel and dime. I mean, They broke the piggy bank, and he was taking every piece of change and counting that shit at the counter. I hated to be the guy behind Brian Daboll when he was breaking that piggy bank and getting all those nickels, pennies, and dimes from Daniel and to pay for those victories. That's the worst. But he did it. I didn't want to see what he could do when he's got a dude out there that's making it rain with dollar bills. So I was glad we were able to do our part to ensure that they wouldn't do that. Now, they may still work in their favor, and they may end up getting a guy really talented, at 6 or, later on in the draft, or trading back and getting a guy or whatever. But we did our part to make sure they didn't get their hands on Jaden Daniels or Drake May. That was important, at least to me. Zoe Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Zoe Life, No Life writes, Tua and Herbert technically didn't start right away. Technically, Tua doesn't count. Herbert was perfectly fine and healthy, and they were going to go with Tyrod Taylor as a bridge. He gets hurt in week 1, punctures his lung with an injection in week 2, and Justin Herbert started in week 2 and never looked back of his rookie season. So technically, you're right. Tua doesn't count because he came in and they knew his hip wasn't ready to go when they drafted him. So they expected to sit him. So technically, yes, but Tua doesn't count. But Herbert does. Herbert does. Absolutely, he does. Justin Fields didn't start. He wasn't a top 5 pick, which is what I said. And I think I said top 5. I might have said top 10. But I think I said top 5. And if I said 5, Herbert wasn't a top 5 pick. So he wouldn't technically fit in that criteria. But if I said 10, then yes, of course, he fits. So does Justin Fields, and he didn't start either. Andy Dalton started. So anyway, I digress. Zoe Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, also meant up to mid-season to start him. Yeah, you don't see NFL team. I remember the Jags were gonna sit Blake Bortles, and we beat the brakes off of Chad Henne. And I think we beat him like Kirk Cousins. Robert Griffin got hurt in that game. Cousins came in, went ape shit. We scored like 45 points, which we don't do those types of things. We scored like 45 points, beat them like 45-10 or some shit like that. And the next week they started Blake Bortles. So I was like, okay, enough of this shit. You just don't see guys sit that long. I think Fields might have sat like maybe 4 weeks or so before he played. That's as far as a guy goes. Watson sat probably like 2 weeks before he played. How long did Baker sit? He sat a little while, maybe the first 4 games or so. Remember, he won that game. The Browns hadn't won. Remember, they went winless the year before they got Baker, right? Or they won 1 game or something like that. But they hadn't won in like 20-something games in a row. And he beat the Jets on a Thursday night. And that was his first. I don't think he started that game. I think he came in relief. And then he started from that point forward. But anyway, it's rare, like I said before. Especially mid-season, that's rare. Metaphor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, my 2 P's for the draft are position and potential. So in other words, you want to maximize every pick. You sound like every other fan out there, right? Don't reach for need. Take the best player available at the position you're at, which coincides with potential. So, CJ Shoots Photo. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I knew you'd pick a guy with position flex, punt, and QB. I did tell you he can punt. He can pooch punt. So can Bo Nix. So can Bo Nix. Vincent Coe. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Vincent Coe writes, do you think we can draft Rattler in the 3rd round still? Yeah, you can. He's a Seattle Seahawks fan, by the way, in case you were wondering. He wasn't talking about Washington. Yes, I think Rattler will still be there in the 3rd round, and it makes a ton of sense. I actually like him in Seattle a lot. With those weapons, with those receivers, Spencer Rattler could really do some damage in Seattle. You could get that Russ experience all over again. Wasn't Russ a 3rd round pick? You can get that shit all over again. He's good enough. Now there's some shit there that you're gonna have to clean up, and if he doesn't, there's a lot to like about Spencer Rattler, though. He's a gamer. I'll say that, and I've said it before. I'll say it again. That's my favorite thing about him. He's a gamer. You can get behind a guy that's a gamer, and he's a gamer. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wings writes, TBF, to be frank, it's hard to find a bad JD game aside from the FSU game, so it's hard to find a game that portrays his negatives in such as much as the other 2 guys. And that would have been the one that I would have gone to, especially this past season, because there really just wasn't a lot of, he threw 4 interceptions. He fumbled like twice, and he lost like 2 fumbles. Like, there wasn't a lot for him to give you to say, because he's a safe player. Again, this speaks to the floor being high. He's not going to put the ball in harm's way. There are not going to be a ton of instances where he throws, like I showed you, he threw into double coverage, and you're like, why would you do that? He doesn't do that very often. So I would have had to gone back to his first year at LSU, the year prior, or I'd have had to go back to some ASU film if you really, and for me, I think when you're taking the whole body of work into consideration, it's important that you go back and watch to see the maturation and the growth, or to see if they're still making some of the same mistakes they made as a youngster. But when we're talking about where they are now, what he was doing in 2020 at ASU doesn't really factor into that equation. Again, unless he's still doing some of the same things and making some of the same mistakes. But you really want to watch the 2023 games, because that's going to give you a better indication of the player that you're getting and where he's going and what his trajectory is. But if you're drafting a guy, like as a fan, I don't need to go back to 2019, although I did go back and watch some of that stuff. I don't need to do that. The 2023 games are just fine, because that's the guy that you're going to get, not the guy from 2019. So there weren't many games, but the FSU game would have been it. There just wasn't enough plays in that game that I either had a plus or minus on, so it didn't make sense for me to show that game, in my estimation. I tried to go with the games where I had a ton of notes for, the most notes, with all the quarterbacks. King of the North, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Excuse me. Great. King of the North writes, excuse me, reasons I slightly prefer Drake May over Jaden Daniels. Bigger body, bigger arm, looks to throw on the run, steps up into throws in the face of pressure. JD does not step into throws when he knows a hit is coming. Facts. His thing is to back pedal and throw a fadeaway. He's not looking to stand tall, take a shot. He's going to fade away. And you're absolutely spot on about that. That's a good observation. I talked about the fadeaways with him. And you see those fadeaways with Caleb Williams sometimes too. He doesn't want to get hit either, which is why he does all that running around. No quarterback wants to be hit. Let's be frank, right? No quarterback wants to get hit, but there is a level of courage that is required of the position to stand in there when you know you're going to get hit, but there's an open receiver and you need to deliver the football? Who's going to stand in there and take the shot? I think the biggest difference between Sam Howell at the beginning of the season and Sam Howell at the end of the season was the Sam Howell we fell in love with at the beginning of the season was willing to stand in there and in the face of pressure and getting hit, deliver the football. He had balls of steel at the beginning of the season. As they continued to beat into his skull, don't take sacks, don't take sacks, don't take sacks, get rid of the football, he started to get squeamish in the pocket. You could say it came from him getting hit too much. I don't think that's what it ultimately stemmed from. They got into his head, told him don't take sacks, don't turn, don't, get rid of the football, find incompletions. He kept saying that stupid shit over and over again, find incompletions. He literally was going out of his way. Dudes would be open. These same throws he was making early in the season. Guy on the sidelines, wide, he's throwing it 5 yards over his head because he's looking for incompletions. I mean, it was some of the dumbest, stupidest information and coaching you could give a young quarterback. Nobody wants sacks. Those are stupid. Those are dumb. They kill drives. I'm well aware of that. But are you going to kill his career here in Washington at the expense of not wanting 2nd and 18 because he took a sack, or not allowing him to stare down the gun barrel? Like, don't get me started on that shit. Yes, I agree with you. Everything you just said about Drake May versus Jaden Daniels. I agree with all of it. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass writes, do you think Drake May is similar to when Josh Allen came out? Tremendous talent, but bad tape in his last season. No, I don't think so. I really think that, like, the tape wasn't terrible this year from Drake May. Josh Allen's tape in his last year was bad. You could see him playing hero ball. You could see he lost a lot of the guys that he relied on the year before at Wyoming. They went to the NFL. Jacob Hollister, the running back Hill, who got drafted by the Falcons. He lost a lot of talent that he relied on the year prior, and it showed, right? And he took matters into his own hands and tried to be, the guy that the rising tide that lifts all ships, but he couldn't do it. But anybody that watched knew he was talented. The big thing people struggled with him was the consistency and the accuracy and the lack of the completion percentage and things of that nature. I don't know if Drake May falls into that category. Maybe. Depends on who you ask. I think Josh Allen's case was a little bit more extreme. It really wasn't. It's similar to Jordan Love's final year, where you could tell he was pressing. Those were bad years. Jordan Love's last year, Josh Allen's those were bad years. I don't think Drake May's season was that bad. From a record standpoint, maybe it wasn't as successful as people thought it might have been. Same thing with Caleb Williams. I think his season wasn't as good as the year prior. So people, say, oh, he had a down. He didn't really have a down year. The numbers weren't as good, but the talent around him wasn't as good either. So it is what it is. But to each his own. Some people may see it as that, right? Some people may see it as that. The Big Bad Wolf Beatty, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, the tape I watched on Drake, most of the throws I've seen look like 50-50 balls. Pause. I don't trust his decision-making and accuracy other than that. So let's talk about that, because There were some games, like if you go to the South Carolina game, for instance, first game of the season this year, he throws a ball up in the end zone and his tight end makes a catch. I did not like the decision. It literally was a 50-50 ball. The defender didn't do a good enough job of adjusting. The tight end saw it. He did. And so he made the catch. And you'll see some instances where he does do things like that, where I go, no, that, like, literally in my notes, I put a plus and a minus. The plus was he escaped pressure, gave his guy a chance, but you're in the red zone and you're throwing up a ball that easily could have been picked off if the defender just turns around and locates the ball. I don't like that decision when points are right now on the board and you could be throwing an interception here. But you scored a touchdown. For some, that reinforces that behavior. If you're a good coach, you tell him, nah, bro. Yeah, we scored, but don't do that shit again. That's what I would have told him. Don't do that shit again. But I don't see a lot of instances where it's like he's just throwing it up for grabs. There are some that exist though. But I'd say this, and I one of my strengths for Drake May was, for lack of a better term, he's a gunslinger, right? He's got that mentality. He has the balls to attempt throws that others wouldn't even dream of trying to squeeze in. There was a throw against Notre Dame in 2022 where there are two defenders conversion, similar to the touchdown pass he had against South Carolina or against Minnesota in 2023, where there's two defenders converging on that football and his receiver is right there and he threads the needle. And I'm like, bro, you're living dangerous. But then I look at him and I'm like, boy, you got a hell of an arm, man. Because I know there aren't many dudes that can squeeze it in there like that. Like I said, there's only like 7 or 8 guys in the NFL right now with just massive arms that can rear back and sling it. You know, Josh Allen is one of them. Justin Herbert is another one of them. Kyler Murray has a ridiculous arm. Like, those are probably 3 of the stronger arms in the NFL. There aren't many dudes that when they rear back can do what, you know, some of these guys can do. Drake May would be adding his name to that list. Caleb Williams, he comes in, he's going to add his name to that list. Mahomes is another one of those dudes. When he decides to rear back and let it go, he can rear back and let it go, right? So we'll see. We'll see. Big Bad Wolf Beatty, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Big Bad Wolf Beatty writes, nah, just a little friendly. I'm good with whomever gets the job done. I'm not one of those fans. Just a preference at quarterback. That's all, fam. Okay. That's all I was looking for. I didn't want any smoke. Okay. Because you said you was looking to whoop some ass. I don't want no smoke, bro. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. That you don't have to agree with the decision that they make. Just support it. That's all I've ever asked of any fan of this team is, you're not going to agree with every move that's made. We all have preferences. And nothing's going to be more divisive than a quarterback being selected because it's so important. So if you thought that, you know, people were upset 2 years ago when the team took Jahan instead of, you know, and trading back instead of taking, you know, and now seeing what Kyle Hamilton has turned into, or you know, Chris Olave, and you thought they were upset then, or they were upset when we took Jamin Davis. Wait till you see what happens if they take a quarterback that they don't agree with. I just hope that they can understand that you being upset isn't going to change anything. So just get on board. You don't have to love it, but support it. And if it doesn't work, you can come back and say, see, I told you so. Zo Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. double up. I think that's a double up, might be a triple up. Right. Seahawks getting Penix. They got Huskies, OC, Grubs. You're right about that. And I saw that, and it makes a ton of sense. And Penix would make a ton of sense there because he's very similar in his skill set to Geno Smith. Like very, very similar. Scary even. So, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know if Penix makes it to Seattle. Like the Seahawks have to be willing to spend the first round pick. Do they have a first round pick? I'm not sure. I don't keep up with these things of what other teams have done with their picks. Seattle in past years, they're a team that trades back. They usually don't trade up. So I would assume they still have their first round pick. Are you willing to spend that on Michael Penix Jr.? Because Seattle didn't make the playoffs, but they came close to making the playoffs. So they're at the back end of the first round where Penix would make sense. I've said this already. I got a late first, early second round grade on him. Are they willing to pull the trigger on him in the first round? We'll see. If not, I don't know if he makes it to the back end of the second round. Don't think he will. But again, we'll see. That's a good point, though, Life. No life. Very good point. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, I'd like to see you delve into O-line, tight end, or DN next. And I'm going to put out a poll and let you guys decide what's next. I can tell you this right now. If we're doing offensive line next, I don't know if I'm doing a film session on that. Like, there's nothing more boring than watching offensive line film. It is a necessary evil. And another thing about the offensive line is you have to watch every single play. Those dudes do not come off the field. So that could get long and tedious. I'm not doing it. But I will break it down and I will talk about what I saw. But I don't want to watch a guy run block for 37 snaps and then pass block for another, 29 or 40. A lot of plays in college football games. So anyway, I digress. Dr. B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Dr. B, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, this is a win-win situation and fans should be happy with whomever we end up with. At least we have options and aren't drafting 16th like normal. Yeah. And you're so spot on about that. The thing that sucks is to get as high as number 2, you got to endure what we went through in the right, and that was painful. It sucks being one of the worst teams in football. You have to admit. It pays, right? Like, what if you're willing to take the lumps that is required to get to where we are? It pays off huge dividends if you are able to cash it in and take advantage of it. But boy, does it, when you're in it, boy, does it suck. My God, I hate being this bad. But it beats the alternative of winning 3 meaningless games like the Giants did at the end of the season and ending up with the 6th pick, or getting hot late in the season like the Raiders did and ending up with the 13th pick. It beats that alternative, right? So anyway, I digress. Phil, just because I don't love watching offensive line doesn't mean I don't know football. That's a terrible statement. It's a part of the job. It's a requirement, but it's not one of the more entertaining portions. Just like drafting an offensive lineman. It's not sexy. Hard to get excited about an offensive lineman putting a guy's dick in the dirt. Pause. But you have to do it if you want to have a good offensive line. Not a lot of fans are willing to swallow their fandom and be excited about drafting Ryan Kelly like we were going to do that one year. But the Colts took him before we could. Not a lot of fans are excited about drafting a center in the first round. It's hard to get excited when you draft Brandon Sheriff at 5. And then your head coach comes out a year later and says, we drafted a guard. But that's a part of the business, right? Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I've given you my top 7 quarterbacks to recap. Number 7, Spencer Rattler. Number 6, J.J. McCarthy. Number 5, Michael Penix Jr. Number 4, Bo Nix. Number 3, Jaden Daniels. Number 2, Drake May. And number 1, Caleb Williams. And I don't know if that's the order that they'll come off the board. I think the first 3 will come off the board in that order. I think after that, it's anybody's guess as to what will happen. But again, so much time between now and the draft for that order to be shaken up. And we'll see what the preference is with these other teams and what the preference are with the teams at the top of the draft. Who knows? We'll see. But in any event, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll have a ton of content for you guys over the next 3 days to get you through the weekend, and then we'll be back like cook crack on Monday, chopping it up. Until then, enjoy. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.